Inside the black leather presenter, the bold font screamed $2,643.50. Across the table, my mother-in-law, Patricia, dabbed a speck of caviar from her lip, flashed her pageant queen smile, and whispered, "Happy birthday to me, darling. You'll get this, right?" In that exact moment, my marriage imploded. If you want to understand the woman my mother-in-law is, you only need to look at her living room in Highland Park. Everything is a pristine, untouchable beige. There are no family photos that haven't been professionally airbrushed, and the coffee table books are all about French chateaux she has never actually visited. Patricia Harrington is a woman who lives and breathes for the illusion of wealth. My husband, Ben, grew up in the shadow of this illusion. His late father had been a dentist, a successful one, sure, but he didn't leave behind the kind of generational wealth Patricia liked to project. When he passed away 5 years ago, the life insurance was substantial, but Patricia blew through a terrifying amount of it in the first 2 years on European cruises and a complete kitchen remodel she didn't need. Ben is a mid-level accountant, a practical, numbers-driven guy who usually acts as the family's reluctant voice of reason. I work as a freelance graphic designer. We live comfortably in a modest 3-bedroom on Oakwood Drive, but we are by no means rich. We track our groceries. We budget for vacations. We were, at the time, aggressively trying to pay off my student loans so we could start thinking about having a baby. Then came the group text that started it all, Patty's Fab 60th. It was created by my sister-in-law, Jessica. If Ben was the reluctant voice of reason, Jessica was Patricia's enabler, the undisputed golden child. Jessica had married a commercial real estate developer named Greg, a man whose personality consisted entirely of golf handicaps and leased Porsches. Because Jessica and Greg had money to burn, Patricia naturally assumed Ben and I did too, or rather, she didn't care if we didn't. We were expected to keep up. "Hi, everyone," Jessica's text read. "Mom's 60th is coming up next month on the 14th. She has her heart set on a private room at Le Pot. I'm handling the guest list. Let's make it a night she'll never forget." My stomach dropped the second I read the name of the restaurant. Le Pot was a Michelin-starred French establishment downtown. It was the kind of place where a side of asparagus costs $40, and the menus don't have prices listed unless you're the one paying. I looked up from my phone across the kitchen island, where Ben was eating reheated lasagna. "Ben, your sister wants to take your mom to Le Pot for her birthday, with a private room." Ben sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I saw. "It's a milestone birthday, Chloe. 60 is a big deal." "I get that, but we can't afford a share of a private room at a Michelin star restaurant for her and 20 of her closest friends. We just replaced the water heater." "Let me call Jess," he said, holding up a hand. "I'll figure it out." I listened from the kitchen as he paced the hallway, his voice dropping low as he negotiated with his sister. When he came back 10 minutes later, he looked relieved. "Okay, crisis averted," Ben said, leaning against the counter. "Jess said the private room is already booked anyway. They're just doing a large table in the main dining room. 14 people. Jess and Greg, Aunt Susan, Uncle Bob, Patricia's tennis club friends Brenda and Joanne, and a few others." "And the cost?" I pressed, crossing my arms. "Everyone is paying for themselves," Ben assured me, his eyes earnest. Jess was very clear. "It's a group dinner, separate checks. The only thing we have to do is cover Mom's meal. Jess and Greg are buying her a designer handbag, so our gift to her will be covering her dinner. That's it." I did the math in my head. Even at Le Pot, 2 entrees for us, plus Patricia's meal, maybe a shared appetizer, and a couple of drinks we were looking at, around $400, maybe $500 with a generous tip. It was a steep price for one dinner, but it was her 60th, and as Ben's wife, I wanted to be supportive. "Separate checks for everyone else?" I clarified. "And we strictly just pay for Patricia's food and drinks?" "Yes, Chloe. I promise. Mom even agreed to it. She said she just wants everyone she loves in one room." "Okay," I exhaled, letting my guard down. "We can budget for that. I'll pull a little from our entertainment fund for the month." Looking back, my naivety was almost laughable. I trusted the logic of a family that operated entirely on smoke, mirrors, and passive-aggressive entitlement. I spent the next 3 weeks helping Jessica coordinate the floral centerpieces for the table, feeling a false sense of security. I even bought a new dress, a modest navy blue wrap dress on sale at Nordstrom Rack, so I wouldn't look out of place among Patricia's wealthy country club friends. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush. The night of the dinner, a torrential downpour soaked the city, making the valet line at L'Epoque a chaotic mess of umbrellas and headlights. By the time Ben and I got inside, the hem of my dress was damp, and I was already feeling deeply out of my element. The restaurant interior was intimidatingly beautiful. Heavy velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers that looked like inverted wedding cakes, and an overarching hush that always signifies stupidly expensive food. We were led to a massive, beautifully set table near the back. Almost everyone was already there. Patricia sat at the head of the table like a reigning monarch, draped in a faux fur stole that she refused to check at the coat room. Jessica and Greg flanked her on the right. "Ben! Chloe!" Finally, Patricia crowed, waving a hand adorned with enough jewelry to blind a pilot. "We were beginning to think you got lost in the peasant traffic." Her tennis club friends, Brenda and Joanne, chuckled politely. I forced a smile, taking the only two seats left at the absolute furthest end of the table, opposite Patricia. Ben sat next to me, looking apologetic but unwilling to disrupt the seating arrangement. Almost immediately, the waiter appeared. He was a tall, severe-looking man named Claude, bearing an iPad and an air of superiority. "Good evening, madam," Claude said, addressing Patricia directly. "Shall we begin with beverages for the table?" Patricia sat up straighter, adjusting her stole. "Yes, Claude. Tonight is a very special milestone. I am turning 60. I think we need to start this evening properly. Let's do champagne for the table. Dom Pérignon, the vintage." My head snapped up. I looked down the long table at Ben, my eyes wide. "Dom Pérignon? For 14 people?" "Excellent choice, madame," Claude bowed. "I shall bring 3 bottles to ensure the entire table is accommodated for a toast." 3 bottles. I frantically pulled out my phone under the tablecloth and Googled the restaurant's wine list. My stomach plummeted into my shoes. A bottle of vintage Dom Pérignon at L'Epoque was listed at $550. 3 bottles. That was $1,650 before tax and tip, just for the opening toast. I aggressively nudged Ben's knee under the table. When he looked at me, I showed him my phone screen, my thumb pointing to the price. I mouthed, "Who is paying for this?" Ben's face tightened. He grabbed his phone and texted me. "Ben, relax. She's probably putting the drinks on Greg's tab. Or she's paying for the toast herself as a thank you to the guests." Jess said separate checks. I swallowed hard, trying to quell the rising panic in my chest. Separate checks. I had to cling to that. Patricia was extravagant, but surely she knew we couldn't absorb that kind of cost. The champagne arrived. Corks popped with a sickeningly expensive thwack. Crystal flutes were filled, bubbling with golden liquid. I barely took a sip of mine, the liquid tasting like liquid anxiety. "To me!" Patricia beamed, raising her glass. "To 60 years of fabulousness, and to the friends and family who make life so rich." Everyone cheered. Jessica leaned over and kissed her mother's cheek. Greg raised his glass, looking utterly unbothered. Then came the food orders. Claude returned, handing out menus. "For parties of this size," he announced, "we highly recommend the Grand Seafood Tower to start, followed by individual entrees. Shall I bring 2 towers for the table to share?" I looked at the menu. The Grand Seafood Tower featuring Maine lobster, oysters, king crab legs, and caviar was $250. 2 of them would be $500. "Oh, absolutely, Claude," Patricia chimed in before anyone else could speak. "Bring 2. And we'll need some truffle fries for the table as well. As for my entree, I simply must have the A5 Wagyu filet." The Wagyu was Sasnjoltsvan. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. I looked at Ben again. He was staring intensely at his water glass, avoiding my gaze. "Ben," I whispered fiercely, leaning in so Aunt Susan, who was sitting across from me, couldn't hear. "You need to go talk to your mother right now. You need to clarify how this is being split." "Chloe, stop," he hissed back, his face flushing. "You're being paranoid. I'm not going to cause a scene and ruin my mother's 60th birthday dinner over an appetizer order. Jess set this up. It's handled." I fell silent, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The dinner progressed in a blur of excess. The seafood towers arrived, majestic and terrifying, overflowing with crushed ice and claws. Patricia's friends tore into the crab legs, ordering rounds of dirty martinis and premium scotch. Greg ordered a $100 glass of Macallan. Jessica ordered a branzino stuffed with crab meat. When it was our turn to order, I pointed to the cheapest thing on the menu, a $38 roasted chicken breast. I asked for tap water. Ben ordered a modest steak. We were trying to offset the incoming damage of Patricia's Wagyu, but I could feel the mathematical reality slipping through my fingers. Halfway through the main courses, Patricia waved Claude over again. "The champagne is gone, darling," she said, tapping her empty flute. "We simply must have red wine for the steaks. Bring us 3 bottles of the Silver Oak Cabernet." Another quick under-the-table Google search. $200 a bottle. $600 total. I excused myself and rushed to the restroom. I locked myself in a marble stall and pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes, taking deep, shaky breaths. "It's separate checks," I repeated to myself like a mantra. "The waiter will ask how to split it. Greg will take the wine. Everyone will pay for their own entrees. We just pay for the Wagyu and the chicken." I stayed in the bathroom for 10 minutes, trying to compose myself. When I finally emerged and walked back to the dining room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Jessica was standing near the waiter's station, whispering intensely to Claude. She was pointing toward our end of the table. Pointing directly at Ben's empty chair, he had apparently gotten up to use the restroom too. I sped up my pace, arriving at the table just as Jessica was sitting back down. "Everything okay, Jess?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She jumped slightly, her eyes darting away from mine. "Oh, yes, Chloe. Just letting the waiter know about the birthday cake we brought." I didn't believe her. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, suffocating. Dessert was a spectacle. A 3-tiered fondant cake that Jessica had custom ordered was brought out by 3 waiters. We sang Happy Birthday. Patricia blew out the candles, her face glowing in the dim light of the restaurant. Photos were taken. Flashes blinded me. And then, the plates were cleared. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only the loud, ringing silence of the inevitable. Claude approached the table. In his hand was a sleek, black leather checkbook presenter. He didn't stop at Patricia, the guest of honor. He didn't stop at Jessica, the organizer. He didn't stop at Greg, the millionaire. Claude walked the entire length of the long table, stopping directly behind my right shoulder. With a crisp, professional nod, he placed the black leather booklet gently onto the pristine white tablecloth, right between me and Ben. "Take your time, sir, madam," Claude murmured and turned on his heel. The black leather booklet sat between Ben and me, like an unexploded bomb. The restaurant's ambient chatter, the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, and the clinking of fine silver faded into a dull, echoing ring in my ears. I felt a cold sweat prickling the back of my neck. Ben reached out with a trembling, clammy hand and flipped the cover open. I leaned in, my eyes scanning past the beautifully printed, itemized list of exorbitant luxuries. I saw the Grand Seafood Towers listed at $500. I saw the Dom Perignon at a staggering $1,650. I saw Greg's Macallan, the multiple bottles of Silver Oak Cabernet. My brain struggled to process the sheer volume of consumption, skipping rapidly down the thick, textured receipt paper straight to the bottom line. $2,166.80, plus an automatic 22% gratuity mandated for large parties. Total, $2,643.50. Ben's face drained of all color, matching the stark white of the starched linen tablecloth beneath his plate. He looked as though he had just been physically struck. His breathing grew shallow, and his eyes frantically darted away from the terrifying numbers, seeking out his sister at the far end of the long table. "Jess?" he croaked, his voice cracking like a terrified teenager's. He cleared his throat and tried again, slightly louder but still desperate to avoid a scene. "Jess, what is this? I thought we were doing separate checks. Why is the entire table's bill sitting here?" Jessica, who had just taken a delicate, slow-motion bite of her $800 fondant cake, dabbed her perfectly lined mouth with a linen napkin. She widened her eyes, offering a look of exaggerated, theatrical innocence that she must have practiced in a mirror. "Oh, Benny, don't be so dramatic," Jessica laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated against my eardrums. "Greg and I already covered the cake, and we bought Mom that gorgeous Prada tote she's been wanting for months. It's only fair that you guys pick up the dinner. You haven't contributed to her birthday gift at all. Ben looked completely sideswiped. We agreed to pay for Mom's dinner, just her meal. That was our gift. We didn't agree to pay for 14 people to drink vintage champagne and eat lobster claws. Well, it's a bit late to nickel and dime everyone now, isn't it, bro? Greg chimed in, leaning back in his velvet chair and picking his teeth with a gold-plated toothpick. He exuded the arrogance of a man who wiped his hands with $100 bills. It's Mom's 60th. Step up, man. Don't embarrass her in front of her friends over a few bucks. A few bucks. I felt the blood rushing to my face. A hot, prickling wave of pure, unfiltered rage. $2,600 wasn't a few bucks. It was our safety net. It was months of strict budgeting, skipped coffee dates, and delayed car repairs. I looked down the table at Patricia. My mother-in-law was entirely unbothered by the quiet chaos erupting at her party. She calmly swirled the last few drops of her expensive red wine in her glass, her eyes locked onto me with a predatory gleam. "Patricia," I said, my voice sharper and louder than I intended, cutting through the hushed ambiance of L'Epoque. "Ben and I cannot afford a $2,600 dinner. You know this. We agreed to cover your meal, and that was it. This is completely unacceptable." The table fell silent. Brenda and Joanne stopped chewing. Aunt Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, suddenly finding the crystal chandelier fascinating. Patricia's eyes narrowed, the warm maternal facade dropping from her face like a heavy theater curtain. She didn't yell. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she reached across the table, her manicured fingers heavy with diamond rings resting on the edge of the black leather booklet. With a deliberate, agonizingly slow motion, she slid the checkbook down the center of the table. It glided over the smooth linen until it bumped softly against my water glass. She smiled her polished pageant queen smile, wiped a phantom speck of caviar from her lip, and whispered, loud enough for just our end of the table to hear, "Happy birthday to me, darling. You'll get this, right? It's the least you can do to be part of this family." The sheer audacity took my breath away. She wasn't just expecting us to pay, she was relishing the power play. She had orchestrated this entire evening with Jessica to force our hand, knowing full well that Ben was too spineless to make a scene in a public, upscale setting. She wanted to prove to her country club audience that she reigned supreme, that she commanded total financial obedience from her children. "No," I said, the single syllable sharp and definitive. "Chloe, please," Ben hissed, his hand shooting under the table to grip my thigh with bruising force. His forehead was slick with a terrified sweat. "I'll put it on the emergency visa. We'll figure it out later. I can pick up some overtime. Just let it go. Everyone is staring." "Let it go?" I turned to him, incredulous, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Ben, this is our emergency fund. This is the money we saved for when my car breaks down, or for the baby we're supposed to be trying for. You are not putting your mother's vanity on our credit card to save face." Aunt Susan cleared her throat from across the table. "Is there a problem, Patricia, dear?" "No problem at all, Susan," Patricia said smoothly, her voice dripping with venom as she kept her icy gaze fixed on me. "My daughter-in-law is just having one of her little episodes. She's always been terribly frugal and high-strung. It's a working-class upbringing thing, I suppose. Some people just don't know how to exist in polite society." That was the breaking point. The thinly veiled, classist insult about my background wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a match dropped into a powder keg. I didn't care about the Michelin stars anymore. I didn't care about the velvet drapes, the snooty waiter, or the polite society rules. And I certainly didn't care about protecting Patricia's fragile, inflated ego. I snatched the leather checkbook off the table, pulling a ballpoint pen from my clutch. "Chloe, what are you doing?" Ben panicked, trying to grab my wrist. "I'm doing the math, Ben," I said coldly, swatting his hand away with enough force to make him flinch. "Since you're an accountant who apparently lost his spine and his calculator tonight, I'll do it for you." I stood up, holding the bill so the entire table could see it. "Let's clear something up," I announced, my voice steady and echoing slightly in the dining room. Brenda and Joanne gasped, clutching their designer clutches. Ben and I agreed to pay for Patricia's birthday dinner. So, let's see. Patricia had the A5 Wagyu for $180. I had the roasted chicken for $38. Ben had the strip steak for $55. That's $273. "Chloe, stop it right now," Jessica hissed, her face turning a mottled red. "You are ruining Mom's birthday. You are humiliating us. You humiliated yourselves. I shot back, locking eyes with Greg. Greg, you had $100 glass of scotch. Brenda, Joanne, you both ordered your own seafood tower and drank a bottle of silver oak. You are all adults. You can pay for what you consumed. I caught the eye of the severe waiter Claude, who was hovering near the server station, pretending not to watch the unfolding drama. I raised my hand and signaled him over. Madame? Claude asked, stepping up to the table with a perfectly neutral expression. Claude, I need you to split this check, I said clearly. I will be paying for my chicken, my husband's steak, and the birthday guest's Wagyu beef. I will also include a generous 30% tip on those specific items for your excellent service and for dealing with this circus. The rest of the table will be splitting the remaining $2,300. Claude didn't miss a beat. Very well, madame. I shall print the separate receipts immediately. Wait! Patricia shrieked, finally losing her cool. She slammed her hands on the table, rattling the crystal flutes. You cannot do this to me. Ben, do something. Control your wife. I turned to look at Ben. This was it. This was the defining moment of our marriage. I had drawn the boundary. All he had to do was stand beside me. Ben looked at his mother, whose face was contorted in genuine selfish fury. He looked at Jessica, who was fake crying into her napkin, while Greg aggressively pulled out his Amex. Then, Ben looked at me. His hand was shaking as he reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his leather wallet. He extracted the blue emergency Visa card, the one we promised we would only use if the roof caved in. Ben, I whispered, the anger suddenly replaced by a hollow, sinking sadness. If you hand that card to the waiter, I am leaving. And I'm not just leaving the restaurant. Chloe, she's my mother, he pleaded, his eyes begging me to understand. I can't let her friends see her get stuck with the bill. I'll pay it, and we'll demand Jess pay us back tomorrow. Please, don't make this a bigger deal than it is. She will never pay us back, Ben, and neither will your mother. I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek. You are choosing her delusion over our reality. You are choosing her over me. It's just a dinner, he cried. No, I said, stepping away from the table. It's our future you're spending. Claude returned with a small black tray. Ben, avoiding my gaze, dropped the blue Visa onto it. The finality of the plastic hitting the tray sounded louder than the champagne corks popping earlier that night. Patricia exhaled a loud, dramatic sigh of relief and shot me a triumphant, sickening smirk. Thank you, Benny. I knew you wouldn't let some silly little tantrum ruin my special day. I didn't say another word to her. I didn't say anything to Jessica or Greg. I reached into my purse, pulled out 2 $100 bills, and tossed them onto the table in front of Ben. That covers my chicken and my half of the Uber ride here, I said. Have a wonderful life paying for their champagne, Ben. I turned and walked out of Le Poke. The rain had stopped, leaving the city streets slick and shimmering under the streetlights. I hailed a cab, my heart shattered into a million pieces. Yet strangely, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't go back to the house on Oakwood Drive that night. I went to my sister's apartment across town. By Monday morning, Ben was blowing up my phone with apologies, excuses, and empty promises that he would get the money back from Greg. But the damage was done. The $2,643.50 charge went through. It took a massive chunk out of our savings to pay it off, but I didn't stick around to help him do it. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. I heard through the grapevine that Patricia had another lavish party for her 61st birthday. I smiled when I heard the news, secure in the knowledge that someone else was footing the bill, and for the first time in a long time, my own checkbook was perfectly, happily balanced. And that's how a single dinner bill cost my mother-in-law her punching bag and my ex-husband his marriage. Sometimes, the most expensive red flags come disguised as vintage champagne. If you've ever had to deal with a toxic, entitled family member who constantly crosses your financial and emotional boundaries, drop A in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share this story with someone who needs a reminder to stand their ground, and subscribe for more real-life drama.